live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com. This is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Going to make a prediction here. I'm going way out on a limb. Unless, here it is, unless Pierre Poilievre is caught, I don't know, kicking a puppy between now and the next federal election, I predict that if he doesn't sweep the country, he will ride to a relatively easy majority victory. Now, I realize if I'm wrong, I'll never hear the end of it. But I am absolutely convinced that something very dramatic is happening in this country. And Pierre is riding a giant wave of what I would call rebellion. And in fact, no small way, he is feeding that rebellion. In a nutshell, here's what I see. And I want your opinion on this. Increasingly, Pierre Poilievre represents and promotes a counter-culture. And now, if you notice, his campaign thus far is based primarily on attacking not just Justin Trudeau. In fact, he hardly ever mentions Justin Trudeau, but rather most of his campaign is based on what he calls the gatekeepers. Which in my interpretation is the gatekeepers is the entire establishment, the people in power, controlling much of our daily lives. That's really what he's talking about, the gatekeepers. As I say, seldom mentions Trudeau's name, but rather does battle with the gatekeepers. Now, those, he says, and I think that in a way he's right, stand in the way of creating jobs, wealth, progress, and individual freedom. And time again, he says, I will free this up. I will give you freedom. What he's saying is that I will tackle the prevailing culture, the system, and I will change it. That's really what he's saying. He will free us from the control of the establishment. He has, in effect, I think, substituted the word gatekeepers for the establishment. He senses that there's an increasingly powerful sentiment in this country, and I'd like your opinion on this, that for far too long, a very privileged few are making the rules and ignoring the real needs and desires of we the people. I believe and suspect, and so does Pierre, I think, that the truckers' convoy was an early manifestation of a desire to finally somebody fight back against the establishment, against the established authority. And by the way, not just the convoy itself, but the tens of thousands, yes, that's true, who turned out to applaud and cheer. Very clearly, something was happening there beyond just a few truckers heading for Ottawa. And there's simply no question that Pierre Poilievre is strongly identified as not being part of the establishment. In fact, if you were asked to describe Pierre and say, well, do you consider him to be part of the establishment, part of the system? I think overwhelmingly people say, well, no, he's not. He's counterculture. And that, I think, is what he's riding here. On the other hand, his major opponent, Jean Charest, a good man, but Jean Charest, let's be honest, is the living, breathing, white-haired epitome of the establishment. Charest is the establishment. He can't be described any other way. And, you know, there's a wide segment of the media that I believe are part of the establishment. I was watching Power and Politics the other night, a panel discussion, 4 talking heads, and they were all analyzing Pierre Poilievre and the mistakes he was making and how he's got to stop dividing the country and dividing conservatives, and he's got to establish a much more of a campaign platform, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, wait a minute, you guys just don't get it. You don't understand what he's doing. You don't understand because you, the media, you four talking heads, you're part of the establishment. You're part of the authority around here. And I believe that most segments of the media are that as just one. And there's no question when Pierre attacks the CBC, and in fact he's broadened his approach concerning the media more than once. He realizes that for the most part the media is part of the establishment, is certainly the establishment's voice. So that but these four talking heads, and I suspect hardly anybody else in the media realizes what's going on here. Wait a minute. You don't understand what he's doing because he's doing it against you. He is saying, wait a minute, for far too long, we've listened to you talking heads and we've done what you said and taken your advice and so forth. And a lot of the advice and a lot of things you said weren't right. That I think, and one of the manifestations of what's happening, and one of the reasons I began to think this and pay much closer attention to what Pierre is really saying, not necessarily the words, but what the words mean, what he is really saying. Excuse me, when he talks about gatekeepers, one of the manifestations of this is suddenly we find out, guess what? A lot of young people, for the first time ever in the history of this country, are flocking to the Tories, to the Conservatives. Why? Because they sense in Pierre, they realize that Pierre is going to be the next PC leader, and I think they sense in him somebody that will fight the establishment. Most young people are anti-establishment. They want to change the system. You ever talk to a young person who didn't want to change the system? System is rotten, they say. By the system, they mean everything, and pretty well so does Pierre. So what's happening is young people are beginning to say, you know what? Here's somebody that is not establishment. He's anti-establishment. He's just like us. Maybe he can make these changes. Maybe he will change the system. He's certainly talking about the system, which nobody else is. And as further evidence of this, when I say he's fighting the system, I don't know if you noticed or not, but Pierre has a comment today, highly critical of a fact that a man who murdered his wife, Canadian man, murdered his wife, has been given a very short sentence and will soon have full parole. And Pierre obviously decries this and makes it very plain, if Prime Minister, that kind of thing will change. To which I would imagine most Canadians would say, hallelujah. But that's one more example how he's going to fight the system. Not just Trudeau, not just the Liberal Party, not just Parliament, the government bureaucracy making a lot of these rules. Government bureaucracy at every level. I mean, when you talk about bureaucracy and how it's impeding, the fact of the matter is, if you want to install a culvert on my road here, it's probably going to take about 6 months to get all the environmental approvals, this approval, that approval, everything else. There'll be an appeal just to install a damn culvert. They say that about somewhere between 25 and 30% of the cost, 30% of the cost of a new home, the government regulations, all the bureaucracy and rules and so forth that are applied. Ever try to get a bylaw change in the city of Ottawa? That's what Pierre is saying. This system is I mean, there's no way that one man can change it all, but at least he is saying, look, we got to change the system. It's not just about building pipelines and mining and opening up more manufacturing. It's not just it's the entire system. This idea where the courts are becoming increasingly lenient, I think there's even some questions, particularly about the mounted police, that how we can even trust them. I think that sentiment is out there too. So I believe that Pierre Poilievre, he's not a Superman or anything, but I think he has tapped into that, and in no small way is helping to lead that. And as a consequence, because you know why? I think that most of us, even though a lot of liberals, maybe not NDP, but I think most liberals, they're ready for some drastic change. I have a feeling that there are a lot of liberals out there very uncomfortable with some of the things that are happening, and maybe secretly say, "Geez, we can't let men out of jail for on full parole after a couple of years they murdered their wife. We just can't do that." And I could go on and give you some more examples, but Pierre Poilievre essentially is campaigning on the promise that he will at least attack the system. Not just the government, not just the bureaucracy, not just the courts, but the entire system. Get a different way of looking at it. That's my opinion, folks. I've been at it a long time. I realize that for a lot of people, this is a new thought. You may agree, you may disagree, you may have some other questions, you may have some thoughts of your own. Have you noticed any other subtle messages that you think Pierre is sending to us? And if I am wrong, explain to me why tens of thousands of people turned out to cheer the convoy, a group of truckers. Explain to me why, and this is, by the way, the CBC is reporting that an increasing number of young people are turning to the Conservatives. I believe it's because they sense in Pierre the counterculture, a guy who is at least going to go to war with the freaking system. That's my feeling. What's yours, folks? John, my feeling is, just to sum up, I think, as I say, unless he's caught kicking a dog or they drag up some, I don't know, that he once stepped on a turtle or something, that I think he's going to win handily. I don't think there's anything. There's this growing desire in the country that something is wrong with the system. In some cases, that's maybe an uneasy feeling, but people will say, geez, that's not right. It's not right we left, all those people who helped us, still left them in Afghanistan. It's not right that we promised 40,000 Ukrainians to come to Canada, and so far there's fewer than 10,000. It's not right that the people are getting out of jail, after murdering their wife. There's something not right. It's not right that the Mounties can't seem to find anything to, people just say there's something wrong here. And I think they sense in Pierre at least a chance that some of this may be righted. It could be wrong, could be very wrong. But I remember going on the air years ago and talking about green energy in Ontario, and a lot of people were mad at me, said I was old fat, didn't know what I was talking about, etc., etc. The future was electric, all the rest of it. Well, turns out I was not only right, I was bloody right. Okay. And I could give you a few other examples. I was right about light rail as well. I've been wrong, haven't we all? But I've been right a few times too. I suspect this time I may be right again. I hope so. How about you, folks? What any thoughts so far, John?
Yeah, lots of comments coming in. And just a reminder, we are on Facebook, so you want to either follow The Lowell Green, Milkman Show, or Blast the Radio. Twitch.tv/Blast the Radio, YouTube.com/Blast the Radio, and on Twitter as well. And we especially invite your calls and your text as well. The number to the studio is 613-413-2217.
You know what else, John? Sorry. One other thing that people are very upset about. This news is just coming out. That during the pandemic, 2.5 years, when thousands of Canadians lost their jobs or were laid off or lost part of their salary, it's that you know the story. That almost 200,000 more federal public servants were hired. A lot of people are not exactly happy with that. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
I can't help, if you're talking about a younger generation, I can't help but think that it's their pocketbook that's having them react and ask questions and get engaged. I mean, if I'm in my 30s and I can't possibly even dream of owning a house, and I've watched every generation ahead of me do just that, I've got some very hard questions about what's going on around me.
I think that's part of it. What I'm saying is that there's a broader issue here. It's the system. I mean, even you, John. You're not necessarily a conservative, but I think that there's something in you that says, you know what, we got to change this. Something's just not working right. That I get that feeling more and more and more. Go ahead, please.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. I'm searching for common sense. I'm searching for some logic. I'm liberal in my thinking. I'm very conservative when it comes to how I want my government to spend money. And I recognize that means you're going to have to cut some things and you're going to have to piss some people off when you do it, but you can't have everything. The taxpayer foots the bill for it all. And at some point, you just got to say no.
Yeah, that's very true. But there are a lot of things that can be done that don't necessarily mean cuts. I use as an example the tremendous red tape now involved in building a house. not just building a house. You want to build an addition to your house, the red tape you've got to go through, the cost of it, etc. There's a farmer not far from me here. He wanted to build one of these sheds, just an open shed. You can
Yep.
buy them almost made to put his tractors in. It was unbelievable. They made him put a berm in front, which he had. So trucks had to bring in stuff and build up the earth in front of it here and everything else. I mean, it was just crazy. And as this is true, the culvert it took them about 3 months to agree to fix a culvert on the road just up from me here. Why? You know what? You know who was checked with to build a culvert? They had to go to fisheries. They had to go because there's a ditch there that has water in it sometimes. They had to go to check to make sure that there were no damn minnows in the damn creek or in the ditch. And if there had been minnows, God knows if they could have ever put the culvert. That's the kind of bullshit that's going on now that Pierre says, wait a minute, hold it. We got to have safety rules, etc. But a lot of this stuff we don't need. Go ahead. Excuse me. Go ahead, John.
Same thing that I remember you and people like Earl McRae raising a hell of a lot of stink about when they were going to build the hockey arena out in Canada and they had to navigate the Carp River to see.
Oh, yeah, right.
So stupid. Nothing's changed all the years. All right, let's get to the comments. Here we go. Let's go to text first. Lowell, I would not say a counterculture. I would say he wants to reverse this government's overreach to back to what it was years ago, when we had a little more freedoms, almost like the USA has. Yes, Charest is part of the old guard, the establishment. As for the media, yes, they consider themselves the gatekeepers by telling us what and how to think of things.
Good for you. Yep. I think you understand it. Good.
Again, the number here, 613-413-2217. Next up is Brian. He's on Facebook, Lowell. He says 200,000 hired. I have to wonder if that is the positions or replacing retirees. Lots of people at retirement
I'm
age
talking.
in the government.
Hold it. Let's stop making excuses, okay? We're talking about the increase. I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but the number of public servants, federal public servants in this country, increased from, I think it was about 310,000 to over 400,000. So we're not talking about we're talking about new hires, additional number of people working in the federal government, coast to coast, okay? A lot of people very upset about that. Then the fact of the matter is that despite all of the talk about, if you weren't vaccinated, you're going to lose your job. Nobody, from what I understand, nobody in the public service lost their jobs because of that. Okay, go ahead, John.
And as we've established, if you're a public servant working for the CBC, you even got a raise.
Yep. Yes, you did. A handy one.
YouTube, Mims. This is the first time we've heard from you. Welcome to the show. Please share this on your social media channels. Let people know that Lowell is still doing his thing and giving them hell. Mims says people are very afraid of big changes. In my opinion, something new, something different. Hope Pierre wins and takes Canada to a different direction. Everything seems to be collapsing under the Liberals. Joshua's on Facebook. I find it somewhat fascinating, he says, that Trudeau Jr. is facing something similar to what his father represented to so many. Pierre Trudeau was fresh, new, and exciting, much like Pierre Poilievre is to Canadians today. Fresh, new, and exciting. Craig says Pierre is about to win larger than Brian Mulroney, except this time the movement is against the radical institution of Justin Trudeau and his completely out-of-control party.
Well, I expand your mind. He's not talking about Trudeau. He's talking about the gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers exist, the establishment exists everywhere. I've already talked about the gatekeepers at the municipal level. The decision to add 25 to 30% of the cost of a new home, that's largely, almost exclusively, a municipal decision. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. So it's not just the federal government. Today he's talking about the courts. So what he's talking about is the entire system, the way we're doing things, this bureaucracy and piling on of red tape and leniency in the courts, all of these things. And the immigration policy, people coming, how many thousands of people have, even this year so far, have come across at Roxham Road in Quebec illegally, that people are saying, all of these things together are creating an idea that, like an earlier writer just said, the sense that things are collapsing. Go ahead, John.
All right, lots of comments still to get to, Lowell. We're 20 minutes in. Let's get a word here for Shields.
For Shields. Talking about doing things the old-fashioned way. The old-fashioned way, in many ways, was a pretty good way. It needed some improvements, but I'm going to tell you something. Talk about the old-fashioned way of doing business. That was the way to do it, where the customer is always right. Treat the customer fairly. live up to your promises. That's what they do at Shields. It's not just a matter of offering very fair pricing, very competitive pricing. As I say, the big warehouse there, so about 90% of all the appliances you want are in stock. But it's the whole idea of treating the customer fairly. Customer is always right. You know what? A lot of places don't really believe that, but at Shields, they do. Shields.ca. Good people. Go ahead, John.
All right, back to your comments on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Murray says, that's your unsustainable government. Unsustainable government. Pardon me, Murray. Sorry about that. Mike says, and all the B stories about nurses refusing to work because they wanted them to get shots, it's all totally false. Craig says, the largest gatekeeper is Justin Trudeau. The removal of him is where it must start, and from there, it must continue. Tom is wondering if we can get Pierre Poilievre on the show. That started a whole other conversation. People saying that would be fantastic. They would really like to hear Pierre on the show. Is that even possible?
Well, we could, but my feeling is that this is a half hour a day where ordinary people get to voice their points of view. Pierre has all sorts of forums, and I think most people know where he stands on most issues. So no, I want this to be for people, for you. Okay. There's all sorts of forums for Pierre and people like that, but there are very few forums left for ordinary people like you. Go ahead, John.
Very good, sir. Ann says, regarding the new positions in the federal government, he just bribed another set of voters, but also because of all the money his government doled out, they had to probably create a whole bureaucracy to administer at places like Finance, Treasury Board, and CRA.
Yeah, let's get back to Pierre here, though. I don't want to wander up. We've already attacked Justin Trudeau many times. Okay, let's get into some new territory. Do you sense what I sense and what I think Pierre does, and that is a growing feeling in the country that we've got to make some drastic changes, that the system is either broken or warped very badly? Healthcare is a very good example. If you don't think that the healthcare system is broken and needs radical change, then you just haven't been paying attention. So let's get back to that, okay? Let's get off the Trudeau. Yeah, and I pointed out that Pierre is not attacking Trudeau. He's talking about the gatekeepers, because the gatekeepers exist everywhere, including, as I say, at the municipal level. Go ahead, please.
So we're all familiar with the whole draining of the swamp thing, and I hate to even bring it up because you know who said it. Is that kind of in a parallel sense?
In a way, but Trump was talking about Washington, okay? And Washington was a swamp. But Pierre is talking beyond that. Today, as I say, he's talking about the courts. That's not Ottawa. And he's talking about the gatekeepers, because I want to repeat again, they exist everywhere, including at the municipal level.
Sure.
Many of the costs that we've got are as a consequence of municipal decisions. The idea of buying electric buses at double the cost. One more example, okay? That's the kind of thing that we've got to maybe have another look at all of this. Go ahead, John.
A lot more comments to get to, but I have another question. So you mentioned earlier, have you ever tried to get a bylaw changed in Ottawa? I mean, the city of Ottawa, Canada, Gloucester, etc. We amalgamated 100 years ago, and the bylaws have still not been amalgamated. So how does someone at a federal level, a Pierre Poilievre, as a prime minister, how does he affect that change on a local municipal level? Because they're two totally different governments.
By changing the attitude. It's largely, governments can only pass what people will accept. And I think increasingly people are looking to, but people need a leader. They need someone to set the direction. Let me give you another example of this. This is a number of years ago. Very dear friends of us were from India, and they made wonderful Indian food. They used to have a little wholesale business out of their homes. They decided to locate out in Bell's Corners, so they rented a spot. Honest to God, 6 months they were trying to get city approval for the proper smokestack for the stove. This is true.
No,
they spent all of their life savings. And Debbie's out here listening. She knows this is true because she was very good friends with them. Their life savings they spent simply trying to get the city to approve some form whereby they could exhaust the stove from the Indian food. In the end, after about 6 months, they were broke. They gave up. The city drove them into bankruptcy. Well, I don't know if they went bankrupt, but they closed they had to close the business. That's the kind of thing. There's the gatekeepers that have nothing to do with Trudeau, but They exist everywhere. Go ahead, John.
Appreciate your answer. Thank you very much. So
Yeah.
it starts at the top, basically. All right.
Yeah, yeah. We need someone to point us in a different direction. Say, wait a minute, hold it. Why are we buying those electric buses? Even if you're federal, why are we buying those electric buses? That's and go ahead, John.
All right, back to Facebook. Ann says, I agree 100% with Lowell about Pierre Poilievre. More and more people are tired of the bullshit coming out of people like Trudeau. That is why so many young people are gravitating towards Pierre Poilievre. They're concerned about their economic future, and rightly so. Trudeau is pissing it away, and people are hurting financially with the cost of living. They do not see it getting better under Trudeau. When you have $100 for a week to buy groceries for a family of four, maybe climate change is not your biggest, most pressing concern. Get rid of the status quo, says Lawrence from View Terry. He's watching on Twitch. Enough is enough. Pierre is a breath of fresh air.
The status quo. That's a good phrase. I haven't used that, but that's essentially what we're talking about with the existing culture. It's the status quo. People like Jean Charest, very fine man. Don't get me wrong, I like him, but he's the status quo. And I think people say, you know what, status quo is not good enough anymore. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Go ahead, John.
Back to Facebook, where Craig says, change happens from great leadership. It inspires effective change. Our existing federal leadership does nothing to instill progress. Mike says, I'm sure if they went through all the red tape in different fields, such as construction and healthcare, there would be so much room for improvement and tax-saving dollars. Just look how long it takes to build anything here. 5 guys and only 1 guy digging is a good example. This happens in too many fields. Boy, the comments are coming in fast and furious now. Wendy says, one of these gatekeepers are such environmental extremists, which causes all sorts of wasteful and costly restrictions.
Very true.
Yep. Nancy, when Pierre talks, I believe him, she says. Over to Michelle. She's watching on Facebook. We need to be pointed in a direction that leads us away from adhering to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's where this all comes from.
No, it doesn't all come from there. It existed long before those sustainable goals. But it could be one aspect of it. It's the buildup, the constant buildup of bureaucracy, which in many cases is established to give more control over us. That's why Pierre talks about freedom. If you get rid of some of the red tape, that gives us more freedom. With more freedom, if you want to build you want to erect a shed, well, we'll give you the freedom to do that. We're not going to make you build a berm in front of it. You want to put a culvert in, we're not going to make you check the ditches for minnows. That's freedom. That's freedom. Go ahead.
Got about 9 comments left. I just want to get a word to people who watch on YouTube after the live broadcast or listen to the podcast. Your comments are welcome as well. You can email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. I pass them on to Lowell always. Mike says, Lowell would ask Pierre all the right questions if he was on the show, the things we want to hear. All right, it's not happening, Mike, so we're moving on. Carl says, Jean Charest is the divisive one, not Poilievre. It's a swamp. Pierre will drain it. Where have you heard that before? And how did the swamp and the mainstream media try to destroy the movement? Kelly says the media and the establishment are so far up their own asses they don't see what they're pushing their own support.
The media for the most part, but the media for the most part is part of the establishment. Certainly the mouthpiece for the establishment. Go ahead, please.
Like you said, Lowell, the unions are too strong these days. Without the revenue of the freaking red tape, our municipalities would go broke. Anne says, Pierre all the way. He's up front, in tune with what's going on. He's going to be a great benefit to Canada and its people. Dean, is first comment from you today. Dean, thank you. By no means am I comparing Poilievre to Trump, but the only similarity is that the mainstream media and chattering classes keep dismissing him and aren't acknowledging that he has a lot of support. That's what happened with Trump in 2016, and look what happened. He got elected.
Because the media never understood the convoy. They never tried to explain to us why they were coming here, but more importantly, why they had such tremendous support. It's still, remember the thousands of people who just spontaneously showed up to support them. Every overpass, all the way. I mean, people showed up, and sometimes in minus 20 degrees temperature. It to me, and I'm sure that Pierre, who's smarter than I am, realized there's something going on in this country. There's something bubbling up here. People are looking for some direction to get us out of this morass. And hopefully that's what Pierre can do. John, we're right out of time. I want to thank people. I had some very good comments today, but keep them coming in. I read them all, and you know what? I store them away in my brain. Don't forget, share too, okay? If you like the show, you think other people should listen to what I'm saying, even if you disagree with me. Push share. Really easy to do. No cost, just push share. Thank you. Back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green Podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green Podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.